week 3, sorry, wow. This is the highlighted week here. As you can see, it's a pretty light week in terms of reading. You just have to continue reading your article, rhetorically analyzing it. And then you've only got one chapter to read, which is chapter 12 in From Inquiry to Academic Writing. And that talks about editing. But to begin with, we're going to talk about the rhetorical review or rhetorical analysis a little more because I just want to make sure you guys have it. A rhetorical analysis considers all elements of the rhetorical situation, and you should be able to recall the rhetorical situation from 101. The rhetorical situation are the elements that make up an act of rhetoric. So the rhetorical situation would be the audience, the purpose, the medium, and the context with which a communication was generated and delivered. Those are things that you would rhetorically analyze. So, say, for instance, you wanted to analyze audience. You would find elements that support your analysis of if it's an academic audience or if it's a general audience. You would find elements within the essay that highlight that and use them as quotes and then rhetorically analyze why they are either effective or not effective. So, say you have an essay that's audience is intended for a general audience because they aren't formal and they're not being as academic as they should have been in terms of citing sources, backing up sources, things like that. But they are very heavy on the jargon. The audience would be general, but they're a rhetorical analysis of that based on what they are doing, the mix of formal and informal and not meeting either the requirements to be accessible to everyone or the requirements to pass as academic writing. That would be a rhetorical analysis of the audience that you could do, that the author isn't meeting their audience because they are out of depth for the average person who it is meant for, but they are not academic enough for it to be taken seriously by academics and being used in a scholarly sense or in a class like that. That would be a way to look at the audience. The purpose of their essay is to inform, entertain, or persuade. Those are the three big ones. You could do there are numerous other ones, but say they are trying to persuade me. That's a thing that you say that they are trying to do. You have a highlighted paragraph that says that the author basically says, in this essay I will be arguing that X is a result of Z. That would be a persuasive argument that they are trying to make, and whether or not they make that case, if they make the case that X is a good thing, or I'm going to use Jonathan Swift as an example. Say, if you've read A Modest Proposal, his proposal is we should eat babies to help stave off starvation, and his little thing was curb the Irish population. It was tongue-in-cheek because the Irish were viewed by the English and probably still are as lesser people. Anyways, the joys of white-on-white racism. It comes down to ethnicity sometimes. Anyways, I'm not going to talk about that because But if that were a proposal that somebody is trying to seriously make, then I would critique that yes, they persuaded me to eat a baby, or no, they could not persuade me. And if they are being persuasive, you would find elements that this makes a persuasive argument, like this little bit that say they're trying to say that doing that would lower the population as well as create a cheap and easy food supply. That if you buy that, great. He's persuading you. If you don't buy that, then why aren't you buying that? That sort of a thing. That's a thing you could do. The medium itself, like that won't come up for most of you because they're written. It could still come up as to whether or not that argument could be more persuasive in an oral argument or a written argument, or in the case of As the World Burns, that comic book one, that would be the medium you could analyze whether or not that was an effective to keeping you engaged and learning more about the subject, or if it was too lighthearted and flippant and it didn't quite resonate with you as being too fun for such a serious topic. That would be a thing you could do. The context within which a thing is written, that would be a thing you could rhetorically analyze, whether or not the author is actually responding to the thing that they are initially inspired them to write, or whether or not they're using that as a thinly veiled like cover to go off on rants. That would be a thing you could analyze. And then again, these things are kind of interconnected. If say somebody is trying to be informal yet academic, whether or not that works together and whether or not they pull it off, that could be something you could critique, as if they're being too formal for it to be informal and not formal enough for it to be formal. So they're kind of switching between using contractions and not using contractions in sentences, using I and me adding themselves or not adding themselves. That's something you will find with Hooks, as she's trying to be more formal, informal, and close the distance between the author by incorporating herself into the essay. That could be something you could even critique as to whether or not it's successful, or yeah. Anyways, I'm going to stop rambling about that. Those are all elements you guys could rhetorically analyze. Before I stop, I wanted to go to chapter 2 here. If you look on page 42, this Hirsch Jr., any of the elements right here, any of these, the identify, their purpose, the situation, you can actually see in here where he does it. Hirsch wants to make sure the situation is what moves the writer to write. To understand what motivated Hirsch to write, we need to look no further than the situation he identifies in the first paragraph of the preface. The social determinism that now condemns disadvantaged children to remain in the same social and educational condition as their parents. Hirsch wants to make sure his readers are aware of their problems so that they will be motivated to read his argument and take action. He presents an argument. So these whole little bits are essentially the author doing a rhetorical analysis. So you are identifying the situation that is causing him to write, and then you are expounding on what is like why or what they are responding to based on what they have written in their text. Another purpose would be a particular situation. Like Hirsch's main purpose is to promote educational reforms to a degree so Hirsch's main purpose is to promote educational reforms that will produce a higher degree of literacy for all citizens. And then, as you can see, they use a quote here that says, cultural literacy constitutes the only sure avenue of opportunity for disadvantaged children, the only reliable way of combating the social determinism that now condemns them to all of that stuff. So, and then as you can see after that, they say, as his argument unfolds, his purpose continues to unfold as well. He identifies schools as a source. So then, again, another one of his purposes, backing it up with a quote, and then a little more expounding on rhetorically analyzing that quote. Yeah, they kind of skip the after bit, but he's got the introduction and then that itself, and then an after bit would be a little bit more about whether or not you believe he is successful. That's kind of what they're leaving out here, is the post part where you are rhetorically analyzing more based on how it connected with you, and that's kind of the joy of rhetorical analysis. And the downside to it is it's very subjective, as it's how the text resonated with you and whether or not it's doing its job based on its interaction with you, and the parameters set out beforehand by the author themselves in terms of the situation, audience, tone, all of that stuff, purpose, the rhetorical situation. There you go. Anyways, this section again, these ones, from 41 on, this whole little bit, reading as a writer, analyzing a text rhetorically, is all great. And same with this little bit. These ones are all really great, and they're great examples of how you guys will want to be doing your rhetorical analysis. Okay, as for the editing itself, let's see here. Let's go back to the chapter. Chapter 12 is the one on editing. Let's start here. Revising and editing are different things. So like revision is larger order concerns, whereas editing is smaller order concerns like punctuation, word choice, that sort of a thing. So here it is. By revising, they mean making changes to a paper to reflect new thinking or conceptualizing. If the reader finds that the real focus of your essay comes at the end of your draft, you may need to revise the paper to with that new focus in mind. So yeah, revising is showing new ways of thinking and reflecting new ways of thinking and conceptualizing in your essay. So revising is changing things up significantly and showing that you are actively thinking about things, whereas editing involves minor changes. Again, here revising, you were going to treat the work as a work in progress, not fully formed. So there might be still things that they are going to expound and explain, and you could put that in your edits to reflect that as expand here, explain more, those sort of things. Yeah. So and yeah. So that's again your revisions focus on new possibilities within the text and beyond the text. So focuses on new questions or goals. So yeah, again, where expanding needs to be done or more explanation. Those are things you want to highlight. Revision would be questions or goals that come up. So like a question, if you have one, would be like, hey, this is a thing that should be answered. That would be a good revision. Whereas if you're just telling them sentence structure, things like that, we don't actually care about that at this point. Those would come in later edits. So that's a thing. Again, revision encourages further discovery, whereas editing, you treat the writing as almost finished. You're just looking for errors and deficiencies in it, writing wise, structurally wise, style wise. You're not suggesting new avenues for discussion, whereas in a revision you would, where you find as the reader revising a paper, if you're finding that they're not explaining enough or not exploring enough, highlight those, point those out to your person that you're editing, and hopefully they will explore those more as they edit. Whereas when revising, whereas as you're editing, it's just like the little tiny things to polish it up. Let's see here. I'm trying to find the inverted pyramid. The inverted pyramid is a great way to look at it. Like oddly enough, these things in the bottom, the situation, issues, thesis, and audience, are things that you are going to want to work on making sure that are clearly present in your thing and being explored, like the situation you're writing for, the issues you are addressing, like your thesis statement with the rhetorical analysis would be whether or not you personally felt the the paper itself effectively engaged with the person, if it was a effective piece of rhetoric, and then your audience, making sure that it's on point for a formal audience. And oddly enough, these are all things that you can rhetorically analyze. You can rhetorically analyze the audience and whether or not they hit it. You can rhetorically analyze whether or not they support their thesis. You can rhetorically analyze whether or not they stay on point with the issues or use it as a springboard to kind of wander in a soapbox. You can rhetorically analyze the whole rhetorical situation in general. Middle of the road, the middle and top are things that you're gonna, if you can't find any of these things, situational issues, or them not being on point with their issues or their thesis or their audience, if they are maintaining all of these things pretty well, then go ahead and go into organizational effectiveness and the use of sources to support your thesis, or in this case, the use of quotes to support your analysis. Those would be things you would look at. These first two circles would be where you guys are really going to focus on, and style and grammar aren't really that important here. I mean, if somebody has written a beautiful paper where you're struggling to find any of this, then style and grammar are great to go ahead and get. But mostly you want to be working on those bigger ideas to make sure that they are on point with their rhetorical analysis, making sure that they are staying within an academic audience, that their thesis is clearly stated, and again, in this case, whether or not the essay you are rhetorically analyzing was effective as a piece of rhetoric, whether or not that's clearly displayed, whether or not you are talking about all of the issues within, as many of the issues as you can within the paper, and that your situation is on point. Hopefully this makes sense. If not, we can have more questions. Again, organizational and effective use of sources to support your thesis is the thing you would really want. And style and grammar are the last things that you do. Again, like they say, the top of the pyramid corresponds to early stages of writing. You should identify the situation the writing is responding to. So the situation, you would want to make sure that they are responding to the essay itself. So there you go. That's a good clarification. Is the situation you are responding to in your rhetorical analysis is the essay itself, not necessarily the issue the essay is writing about. And I've had people kind of do that, where they bypass what an author is saying and look directly past the evidence to kind of say, no, this isn't real. The situation isn't, and they're not actually looking at what the writer is writing about and whether or not the writer is making an effective argument for the situation. They tend to go over that and just try to argue whether or not the situation the writer is writing about is a valid situation to even be writing about. Hopefully that makes sense and steers you guys clear of a little bit of a landmine. So you want to make sure your situation's on point, that you are rhetorically analyzing the actual rhetoric of the essay itself, not arguing against what the author is saying in your essay. You are rhetorically analyzing their argument and their ability to make that argument versus just arguing with them and being like, nope, they're wrong and here is why. So that would be a thing that if you find that somebody is writing a paper that comes off more like they're writing an argument against the other paper versus rhetorically analyzing the paper itself and grounding it in whether or not that rhetorical analysis was effective, would be a thing. I feel like I'm rambling here, so I'm just going to cut it off there. That's what we have for pure editing. It's going to be a lot of editing, more so bigger ideas and whether or not they are fully exploring those things and supporting them versus grammar and those sort of things. Organization and effective use of quotes and whatnot in the essays will be great to have, but grammar and style and stuff like that are like the last concerns. If you want to go through a second time, give them that information, great. If not, understandable. But you don't want to skip over all of these really important things that make a paper actually good and just be like, nope, your grammar and your style are here or there, and give them 4 or 5 little tiny things when there are actual bigger concerns within the paper to do. Hopefully this makes sense to you guys. If not, we can talk more tomorrow and Wednesday. See you guys in class. Have a good one.